You slapped my mother on our wedding day.
You people can't do anything right. That's what the bride said, right before her hand flew through the air and landed across the face of an older black woman in a plain black server's uniform. The entire wedding hall froze. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Champagne glasses trembled in silent hands. Dozens of guests stared in disbelief as the woman staggered slightly, one hand going to her cheek, the other still holding a silver tray. The bride, Eleanor Whitmore, stood tall in a $30,000 wedding gown imported from Paris, her expression twisted in rage. She looked down at the older woman like she wasn't even human, like she was dirt beneath her heels. "You just ruined my dress," Eleanor snarled. "On my day? Get out, now, you're fired." The slap hadn't even finished echoing across the marble walls when a voice cut through the silence like a bolt of lightning. "Mom." Everyone turned. At the grand entrance stood Malcolm Rivers, the groom, 6'2", in a tailored white tux, his expression frozen in something between horror and heartbreak. He looked at Eleanor, then back at the woman still standing quietly, one tear escaping down her face, the tray finally lowered to her side. "Eleanor, did you just slap my mother?" No one spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, and in that one moment, the fairy tale crumbled. The chandeliers above no longer sparkled. They just stared down like silent witnesses to something unforgivable. The reporters lowered their cameras. The flower girl began to cry. Because what just happened wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was something deeper, something ugly, something that had been waiting beneath the surface of this perfect Southern wedding, just begging to be exposed. The bride hadn't just slapped a server. She had slapped the woman who gave everything to raise the man she was about to marry, and she didn't even know it. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched someone show their true face when they thought no one important was watching? Because what happened in Charleston that day wasn't just a slap. It was a mirror, a warning, a test of character, one that would leave reputations shattered, hearts broken, and a nation divided. So stay with us. Watch till the end. Because this story doesn't end at the altar.
It starts right there, with a slap heard across America. Before we take you deeper into this story, let me ask you something personal. Where are you watching from today? Atlanta? Chicago? Kingston? Nairobi? Maybe you're sipping coffee in a quiet kitchen in Tulsa, or catching this on your lunch break in downtown Toronto. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far love, respect, and truth can travel. And while you're here, don't just watch. Be part of something. If you believe that every mother deserves dignity, no matter the color of her skin or the uniform she wears, hit that like button. And if stories like this make you pause, make you feel something, or remind you of the kind of person you want to be, then subscribe to Hidden Worth. Because behind every headline, behind every viral clip, there's a deeper story waiting to be told. And this one is just getting started. Long before the champagne spill, long before the slap echoed through that wedding hall, Loretta Rivers was just a young mother with a baby on her hip and dreams held together with duct tape and prayer. She raised Malcolm in a tiny 2-bedroom house tucked behind a crumbling church in rural Georgia. Their neighborhood didn't have much, but it had heart. Loretta made sure of that. She was the kind of mother who packed peanut butter sandwiches in wax paper and who ironed Malcolm's shirts for school even when her own uniform stayed wrinkled. Back then, she worked double shifts as a nurse assistant at a local care home. The pay was low, the hours were brutal, but she kept at it. Every day, she whispered the same thing before walking out the door. "Mama's gonna make sure you get out of here, baby. One day, you're going to stand tall in rooms I'll never even see." She read to him at night, not fairy tales, but Maya Angelou and James Baldwin. Even when she came home so tired she could barely stand, she'd light a candle on the kitchen table and read until her voice cracked. She believed that if her son could read about dignity, he'd carry it in his bones, even when the world tried to strip it away. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One winter, Loretta got fired.
She had stepped in when a patient, an old man with no family, was being neglected by a supervisor. She reported it, spoke up, and got labeled difficult. A week later, they let her go. The bills stacked up fast. The heater went out,
Malcolm got sick from the cold. Loretta wrapped him in every blanket they had, holding him close and crying in silence, because mothers don't get to break. They just bend. One night she made a choice that would haunt her for decades. She packed a small duffel bag and left Malcolm with her older sister in North Carolina. "I'll be back soon," she promised, kneeling to his eye level, brushing the curls off his forehead. "But right now, Mama's gotta go fix a few things." Malcolm clung to her like he knew better, like he felt the finality in her voice, even if he didn't understand it yet. And just like that, Loretta disappeared. She didn't leave because she didn't love him. She left because she did. Because she didn't want her son to see her unravel. Didn't want him to grow up watching her beg landlords for one more week or cry in silence over expired groceries. She wanted him to remember her as strong, not broken. So she stayed gone. Moved from town to town, picked up work wherever she could. Waitressing, caregiving, cleaning houses, whatever it took to stay afloat. She sent money when she could, always under someone else's name, afraid her pride couldn't survive hearing his voice ask, "Why did you leave me?" Over time, Malcolm stopped asking. He grew up, graduated, and built a name for himself. Loretta kept a box of clippings, printouts of online articles, screenshots from business magazines, and TED Talk photos, all about her son. His smile, his success. She watched from a distance, proud and ashamed all at once. She saw the world praise him, celebrate him, and call him the American dream. And every time someone said, "He must have had amazing parents," she'd look down and whisper, "You have no idea." For nearly 20 years, Loretta stayed in the shadows. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. One day, while working a shift for a catering agency in Charleston, she glanced at a poster taped to the side of the coffee machine. It showed a couple, smiling, flawless, elegant, announcing their wedding date. The groom was Malcolm. Her knees nearly buckled. She read the date 3 times, heart pounding. She asked around, casually, like she didn't recognize the man with the dimpled grin and kind eyes. Nobody knew she was his mother. Nobody knew that she had once rocked that man to sleep in a house that smelled like wood smoke and cornbread. Loretta didn't say a word, didn't try to call him, didn't try to explain. She just took a deep breath, rolled her shoulders back, and signed up to work the event. Not as a guest, as staff. Because sometimes a mother doesn't need to be seen. Sometimes she just wants to see her child smile. Malcolm Rivers didn't come from wealth. He didn't grow up with safety nets or silver spoons. He came from hand-me-down shoes, off-brand cereal, and a silence around dinner tables that whispered of struggle. After his mother disappeared, Malcolm was raised by his aunt in a crowded apartment on the edge of Durham, North Carolina. There were 5 kids, 1 bathroom, and a constant tug-of-war between dreams and reality. But Malcolm had something that couldn't be handed down or borrowed: grit. In high school, he carried a battered backpack stitched at the corners. He worked evenings bagging groceries and weekends washing cars. His report cards always came home pristine, but he didn't care about the grades as much as what they could buy: a ticket out. He landed a partial scholarship to a state university where he majored in computer science. It wasn't the Ivy League, but to Malcolm, it was gold. He walked onto that campus wearing thrift store jeans, clutching a prepaid cell phone, and carrying the pressure of every sacrifice ever made for him. At first, it was rough. He felt like an outsider in every lecture hall. While other students went home for the holidays, he stayed back, picking up coding gigs online or working in the campus dining hall. While his classmates posted selfies at ski resorts and frat parties, Malcolm sat under flickering dorm lights, learning how to debug broken lines of code. He had no plan B, so failure simply wasn't allowed. His breakthrough came in junior year. One of his professors posed a question to the class: "What's a problem you've lived through that technology could help solve?" Most students talked about convenience, apps to find parking, track water intake, and order groceries faster. Malcolm stayed quiet, thinking about his mother, about the way she vanished, about how many times he'd wondered where she was, if she was okay, if she was safe. That night, he started sketching out a rough idea: a location-based safety app for vulnerable individuals, seniors, unhoused folks, and domestic workers. It would let loved ones track check-ins, flag emergencies, and even send silent alerts. He called it HomePin. At first, no one cared, But then a journalist at a student tech expo heard his pitch, wrote a blog post. That blog post got picked up. Within 3 months, Malcolm was fielding emails from investors. Not all of them were kind. Some asked to meet the real founder. Others seemed surprised when he showed up. "You're not what we expected," they said. He knew what they meant, but he never flinched. A year later, HomePin launched nationally. Within 6 months, it had over 1 million downloads. Malcolm was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. His TEDx talk, where he spoke about building tools to protect people no one pays attention to, went viral. And just like that, the boy with the duct-taped backpack became the CEO with a tailored suit and a view from the top floor. But no matter how high he climbed, Malcolm never forgot the feeling of being unseen, that quiet ache of wondering where your mother is and why the world feels so stacked against you. That's why he hired former foster youth, why his board meetings always had at least one community organizer at the table, why he made sure the office bathrooms were gender neutral and the vending machines included local Black-owned snacks. It wasn't about checking boxes. It was about honoring pain with purpose. Malcolm's heart stayed soft, even when the world told him to harden up, which is why when he met Eleanor Whitmore at a charity gala in Manhattan, he didn't see her last name or her legacy. He saw a woman who laughed at his dry jokes, who said she admired men who used success to lift others, and who seemed to glow with confidence in class. Eleanor was born into American aristocracy. Her father was a former senator, and her mother chaired museum boards. She walked through life like everything already belonged to her. But Malcolm didn't care, or at least he thought he didn't. When she kissed him on their third date, she whispered, "You're not like the others." At the time, he took it as a compliment. He never paused to ask, what others? That would come later. For now, he was in love with her, with the idea of finally belonging, and with the dream that maybe he could rewrite what a power couple looked like in America. But Malcolm didn't know one thing. While he was preparing to say "I do," the woman who gave him everything, his mother, was only a few miles away, quiet, watching, carrying secrets in silence. And they were about to step into a room that would change all of their lives. Loretta Rivers never planned to come back into her son's life this way. If she was honest with herself, she never planned to come back at all. After years of drifting from job to job and city to city, Loretta finally settled in Charleston, South Carolina. The city was beautiful in a quiet, complicated way. Cobblestone streets, historic homes painted soft pastels, tourists taking photos of places built on stories no one liked to talk about out loud. To Loretta, Charleston felt familiar. Elegant on the surface, heavy underneath. She rented a small room on the north end of the city. Nothing fancy. Just a narrow bed, a window that caught the afternoon sun, and a dresser rescued from a thrift store. She kept her life simple. Too simple for regrets to grow loud. At 58, Loretta worked through a catering agency that supplied staff for weddings, corporate galas, and charity events. She liked the anonymity of it. Put on the uniform, do the job, go home. No questions, no explanations. That invisibility had become her armor. One slow afternoon, she stood in the break room sipping burnt coffee when she noticed a flyer taped crookedly to the fridge. A wedding announcement. Elegant script. A photo of a smiling couple standing in front of a skyline. She almost walked past it. Then she saw the groom. Loretta felt the room tilt. Malcolm. Older. Taller. Broader shoulders. Same eyes. Her hand shook as she reached out, fingertips grazing the paper like it might vanish. She read the names again, just to be sure. Malcolm Rivers and Eleanor Whitmore. Charleston Estate wedding. Saturday. Her heart slammed so hard she had to sit down. For nearly 20 years, she had watched her son from a distance, through screens and headlines. But this was different. This wasn't a speech or an article. This was his life, his future, and she wasn't invited. Loretta didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply folded the flyer and slipped it into her pocket, like a secret too fragile to expose. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above her head. Questions crowded her chest. Should I call him? Would he even want to hear my voice? Would he look at me and see a mother, or a woman who left? By morning, she had her answer. She wouldn't disrupt his happiness. If Malcolm had built a beautiful life without her, she wouldn't be the one to shake its foundation. She told herself she just wanted to see him, just once, with her own eyes, to know he was okay. When she contacted the agency, fate made the decision for her. They were short-staffed for a high-profile wedding at a private estate. Long hours, high-pressure, VIP guests. Loretta hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said yes. The morning of the wedding, she arrived early. The estate was stunning. White columns, manicured lawns, Spanish moss hanging like quiet witnesses from the trees. Everything screamed old money and tradition. Loretta changed into her uniform slowly. Black dress, apron, sensible shoes. She tied her hair back and looked at herself in the mirror. For a moment, she didn't see a server. She saw a mother. A woman who had once braided a little boy's hair before school, who had kissed scraped knees and whispered courage into young ears, who had sacrificed everything and still wondered if it had been enough. She slipped a folded photo into her apron pocket. A picture of Malcolm at age 8, missing 2 teeth, grinning wide, her good luck charm. Backstage, the other staff buzzed with nerves. No one noticed Loretta's hands trembling as she picked up a tray. No one knew that the groom whose name echoed through the halls was the same child who used to fall asleep on her chest during thunderstorms. She caught her first glimpse of him just before the ceremony. Malcolm stood near the entrance, adjusting his cufflinks, confident, calm.
Everything she had hoped he would become. Loretta had to turn away before her knees gave out. She pressed her palm to her chest and breathed through the ache. This was enough. Seeing him standing strong, alive, loved. That was her reward. She told herself she would stay invisible. Just another worker. Just another face in the background of his perfect day. But the universe had other plans. As the reception preparations intensified, a supervisor rushed over. A staff member had called out sick. Someone needed to cover VIP service near the bridal party. Loretta opened her mouth to decline, but the words never came. Instead, she nodded. She lifted the tray, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward. She didn't know that with every step she took across that polished marble floor, she was walking straight toward a moment that would rip the past open, expose the present, and force the truth into the light. She only knew one thing. She was there for her son, even if he never knew she was. The first red flag came wrapped in a compliment. "You're not like other black guys," Eleanor said, sipping wine across the table from Malcolm on one of their early dates. She smiled as if it were a good thing, as if it were a gift. Malcolm froze for a split second. Then he smiled back, trying not to make it awkward. He told himself she meant well. She always meant well, didn't she? He had spent years navigating rooms where he was the only one who looked like him. So he knew how to translate coded language. He knew how to breathe past moments that should have been called out but weren't worth the fight. And Eleanor? She wasn't malicious. Just unaware. So he let it slide. That became a pattern. Whenever Eleanor said something tone-deaf, Malcolm brushed it off. Like the time they were driving through a low-income neighborhood and she locked the doors automatically. Then laughed nervously. Sorry, habit. Or when she asked if his natural hair got like that on its own. Or when she introduced him to her grandmother and whispered afterward, "Don't take anything she says seriously. She's from a different time." Malcolm always found a way to explain it. Excuse it. Push it down. After all, love was supposed to look past imperfections. and he was in love.
Deeply. The kind that makes you believe you can change the world together. He met Eleanor's parents 6 months into their relationship. The Whitmores lived in an estate that looked like it had its own zip code. Her father, Douglas Whitmore, was a former senator with a jaw like granite and a handshake that never lingered. Her mother, Judith, smiled through her teeth the whole evening and asked more questions about Malcolm's background than about who he actually was. "So, your parents," she started, stirring her iced tea. "I was raised by my aunt, mostly," Malcolm replied. Judith's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, I see." Nothing more, just enough silence to remind him he didn't come from the same world. Later that night, Eleanor tried to apologize. "They're just old-fashioned," she said, curling up beside him. "But they'll come around. My mom actually said you were very well-spoken." That word, well-spoken, it landed like a bruise. But Malcolm didn't say anything. He didn't want to come off as sensitive or angry. He told himself again it wasn't a big deal. Besides, there were good moments, real ones. When they cooked together and laughed over burnt pancakes, when they danced barefoot in her kitchen to Stevie Wonder, when she surprised him with a first edition copy of The Fire Next Time and said, "I want to understand what shaped you." He clung to those moments. He wanted to believe that love could stretch far enough to cover the blind spots. Still, the pressure mounted in subtle ways. When wedding planning began, Eleanor took the reins. She wanted everything elegant but classic, which, in her words, meant nothing too urban or modern. She vetoed a jazz band Malcolm suggested and insisted on a harpist instead. She raised an eyebrow when he asked if they could serve sweet tea and cornbread at the reception. "It's a wedding, not a cookout," she said. They toured venues, mostly plantations turned wedding spaces. Malcolm winced at the plaques describing gracious antebellum architecture and Old South charm. When he brought it up, Eleanor replied, "Babe, that's just history. You can't be offended by everything." By then, he had learned to swallow discomfort like a vitamin, daily, without fail. Even Malcolm's best friend, Andre, tried to warn him. "Are you sure about this?" Andre asked over beers one night. "What do you mean?" Malcolm deflected.
I mean, I've seen the way she looks at your mom's photo. Like she's trying to figure out which part of you to keep and which part to erase. Malcolm stayed quiet. Because deep down, part of him already knew. He knew Eleanor loved the version of him that fit her world. The CEO, the keynote speaker, the man in tailored suits who could charm a boardroom. Not the boy from the trailer park. Not the son of a black woman who once scraped together enough coins to buy him a second-hand backpack. But he didn't want to lose her. So he kept making space, shrinking himself to fit. He told himself it was just tension from the wedding, stress, logistics, nothing more. He didn't know it yet, but the biggest red flag was still coming. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just wave, it would slap. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in sunlight and tension. Charleston's air carried that mix of salt and magnolia, heavy and sweet, as if the whole city were holding its breath for something beautiful or tragic. At the Whitmore estate, the energy buzzed like a live wire. Vendors unpacked floral arches, waitstaff prepped crystal glasses, and planners barked into headsets like generals readying for battle. This was not just a wedding. It was a statement. A carefully chosen display of old money marrying new success, of legacy and ambition, of Eleanor and Malcolm, poised to become the perfect American power couple. At least on paper. Inside the bridal suite, Eleanor's voice rang through the air. "No peonies. I said ivory roses, not cream." A florist scrambled to correct the mix-up while Eleanor paced in her designer heels, adjusting the neckline of her couture gown. Her bridesmaids hovered like ornaments, perfect and polished. Downstairs, Malcolm stood quietly in front of a full-length mirror, fastening his cufflinks. His tuxedo was sharp, his smile practiced. But his eyes? They flickered. Somewhere behind the charm, behind the poise, a question lingered. Was he making a mistake? He'd been asking himself that more and more over the past few weeks, but today wasn't the day to unravel. Not here, not now.
The cameras were already outside. The press had RSVP'd. The whole city seemed to be watching.
So he straightened his jacket, nodded to his groomsmen, and walked toward the ceremony like a man stepping onto a stage built for someone else. A few hundred feet away, in the service tent behind the estate, Loretta adjusted the collar of her black uniform. Her hands moved automatically, folding napkins, aligning silverware, checking champagne temperatures. But her mind was somewhere else. She hadn't seen Malcolm up close since she'd spotted his photo on the wedding flyer. And now, she was just moments from standing in the same room as him, breathing the same air. She wasn't supposed to feel this nervous. She was just a server, invisible, background. But she couldn't stop the ache in her chest or the weight of the moment pressing against her ribs. "Hey, Loretta," one of the coordinators called, breathless. "Change of plan. We're short one person for VIP tray service. Can you step in?" Loretta blinked. "VIP?" "Yeah, near the head table. You'll just be floating, light tray work." She hesitated, her instincts screaming to say no, to stay in the shadows where it was safe. But then she nodded. "I've got it." She smoothed her apron, tied it tight, and steadied her breath. Meanwhile, guests began to arrive in waves. The guests list read like a magazine spread: politicians, celebrities, business executives, and people with smiles too white and handshakes too firm. They sipped champagne and complimented the decor, admiring the golden arch set against the southern sky. Everything sparkled. Everything was perfect, at least on the surface. Eleanor made her entrance like a scene from a bridal catalog. The quartet played soft piano covers of classic love songs. Her veil trailed behind her like a silk cloud. Guests rose, phones lifted, gasps floated through the air. Malcolm stood at the altar, hands clasped, watching her walk toward him. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He scanned the crowd, not for status, not for press, for someone. Someone who wasn't there, or so he thought. Loretta stood near the back, holding a tray, eyes wide but unreadable. She watched her son at the altar, the way he adjusted his posture, the way he exhaled too slowly. She saw the boy behind the man, and her heart cracked wide open. For a brief moment, her fingers trembled. Then she reset her stance and reminded herself, this wasn't about her. This was his day. After the ceremony, the guests rushed into the reception hall, which was a high-ceilinged ballroom draped in cream and gold, and lit by chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a royal palace. The DJ played a jazzy remix of love songs, and the servers moved through the crowd with ease. Loretta moved carefully, silently. She carried herself with quiet dignity, avoiding eye contact, head slightly lowered, like the other staff. But inside, her heart roared. She passed by the sweetheart table, Malcolm and Eleanor seated side by side, smiling for photos, and her breath caught. She was so close she could almost reach out and touch him. Almost, but she didn't. She walked away, gripping the tray a little tighter. She didn't know that in just a few moments, that tray, her silence, and one spilled drop would ignite something that no one could stop. Not love, not legacy, not even blood. Loretta Rivers had carried many things in her life: grocery bags that cut into her hands, her sleeping son from the couch to bed, the weight of sacrifice, but never had a silver tray felt this heavy. She moved through the reception hall like a shadow, balancing crystal flutes filled with champagne. The crowd around her buzzed with money and polish, laughter too loud, dresses are too white, smiles too sharp. She kept her eyes low, her footsteps steady, until she saw him, Malcolm, her son, standing by the head table, laughing with a guest, his hand resting gently on Eleanor's back. He looked grown, taller, fuller in the face, but it was him, no doubt, her baby boy. Her breath caught. For a split second, she forgot she was wearing a uniform, forgot that she was supposed to be invisible. She just saw her son, alive and thriving, and for that moment, it felt like everything had been worth it. She didn't notice the groomsman behind her until it was too late. He stumbled, half drunk, and bumped into her side. Her tray tilted sharply. It was only a few drops, barely enough to count, but 2 perfect arcs of champagne splashed across Eleanor's wedding gown. The music didn't stop, but the mood did. Gasps rippled like whispers on glass. Loretta instinctively turned toward Eleanor, already apologizing. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, it was an accident." But Eleanor didn't hear the apology. Or maybe she did, and she didn't care.
She spun around, eyes blazing and cheeks flushed, and for the first time she really looked at Loretta. Not like a person, not like a woman, but like a problem. And without a second thought, she slapped her. The crack of skin on skin echoed like a gunshot. Loretta's head snapped to the side. The tray clattered but didn't fall. Her lip trembled, but she didn't speak. Her hand rose slowly to her cheek. Her eyes stayed fixed on Eleanor. The room fell into silence. All those eyes, all those people, all that power, and no one said a word. "You people can't do anything right," Eleanor hissed, adjusting her dress. That phrase, "you people," carried the weight of generations, of doors slammed, of jobs denied, of backs bent and voices silenced. Loretta had heard it before, in different words, in different tones, but always with the same poison. She had been slapped before, by life, by systems, by silence, but never quite like this. Not in public, not in front of her son. But Eleanor didn't know that part yet. She didn't know who she had just humiliated, and neither did the guests. Until one voice broke through. "Mom?" It was barely louder than a whisper, but it thundered through Loretta's chest. She turned. Malcolm stood at the edge of the dance floor, frozen. His eyes were wide, mouth slightly open, hands limp at his sides. For a moment, the groom wasn't a man anymore. He was a child again, looking at something he couldn't understand. Eleanor turned, her expression still hard, ready to explain herself. But then she saw Malcolm, and saw who he was staring at. Her face changed instantly. Confusion, then horror, then something else, something colder, like she was calculating how fast she could walk this back. Malcolm stepped forward, slowly. "Did you just slap my mother?" The room inhaled, held it. Loretta wanted to say something, anything, to soften it, to explain, but she couldn't. Her throat had closed up. She looked at her son, her hands shaking now, not from the slap, but from the moment crashing down around her. The secret she had carried for so long was out. Not in a quiet moment of reconciliation, not in the warmth of a private reunion, but here, in front of everyone, in the ugliest way possible. She wasn't ready, but at the moment, I didn't care.
Malcolm's voice cracked again, louder this time. "Did you just slap my mother?" He wasn't asking anymore, he was demanding, and all Eleanor could do was stand there, frozen, as the cameras turned toward her. The whispers rose into a wave, and every beautiful thing she had built began to fall apart, starting with that one open hand. For a few long seconds, the entire room stood still, like someone had pulled the plug on time. No music, no clinking glasses, no polite laughter, just the breathless, electric pause of something too big to ignore. Eleanor stood at the center of it, suddenly very aware of her surroundings. Her wedding gown, once a symbol of wealth and control, now felt like a costume she no longer fit into. Her hand, the one she had just used, twitched slightly at her side. Across the room, Malcolm looked at her like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. "I asked you a question," he said again, quieter now, but firmer. "Did you just slap my mother?" Eleanor's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then, finally, the words slipped through. "I didn't know. I thought she was just—" She stopped herself. "Just what?" Malcolm's voice cracked. His eyes flared. "A server," she said, too quickly. That was it. The final nail. Not just the slap, not just the tone, but the assumption. She thought his mother was just a server, and to her that meant Loretta was beneath respect, beneath dignity, beneath the kind of decency you show in public. And now the entire room knew it. A low murmur began to spread across the guests. Phones started to lift, screens lit up. Someone whispered, "Is that really his mom?" Someone else said, "She hit her on camera."
A bridesmaid gently backed away from Eleanor. A cousin of Malcolm's crossed his arms and shook his head, visibly disgusted. Even Eleanor's own father, standing at the edge of the ballroom, didn't move to defend her. Because some things can't be cleaned up with a press release or a well-worded apology. Eleanor stepped toward Malcolm, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "Malcolm, I didn't mean to. She bumped into me. I didn't know who she was." "But that's the point," he snapped. "You didn't care who she was."
He turned to Loretta, who stood still near the back, eyes wide but calm. Her cheek was still red, her hands now resting at her sides. She looked so small in that moment, but so unshakably strong. Malcolm's chest tightened. Shame and rage collided inside him, swirling into something sharp. He walked over to her slowly. "Mama, I'm so sorry." Loretta didn't say anything right away. She just nodded once, gently. "I'm all right, baby," she said quietly. He turned to Loretta, who stood still near the back, eyes wide but calm. Her cheek was still red, her hands now resting at her sides. She looked so small in that moment, but so unshakably strong. Malcolm's chest tightened. Shame and rage collided inside him, swirling into something sharp. He walked over to her slowly. "Mama, I'm so sorry." Loretta didn't say anything right away. She just nodded once, gently. "I'm all right, baby," she said quietly. "Don't let this ruin your day." But her words only cut deeper, because she had spent her whole life swallowing pain to protect him, and now she was doing it again, right in front of everyone. And he couldn't let that happen. Malcolm turned back to the crowd, his voice rising now, loud and clear. "This woman," he said, pointing to Loretta, "raised me by herself. She worked 3 jobs. She skipped meals so I could eat. She read to me every night. She is the reason I am standing here today." He looked directly at Eleanor. "And you treated her like she was nothing." Eleanor's face was blank now, pale. Her lip trembled. She tried again. "I made a mistake. I panicked. I didn't know." "But you hit her," Malcolm interrupted, "in front of everyone. You humiliated her. And when you found out who she was, you didn't apologize. You made excuses." The tension in the room had shifted. It was no longer awkward. It was moral. It was justice stepping into a space that had been built to exclude it. Someone from the crowd spoke up, an older woman with silver hair and a soft voice. "I recorded the whole thing," she said, "and I think people should see it." Eleanor turned sharply. "Please don't post that." But it was too late. Phones were already uploading, texts were flying, and the story was no longer hers to control. Malcolm took a deep breath. He looked at the crowd, then back at Loretta. "Today was supposed to be a celebration, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't share a future with someone who disrespects my past." He turned to Eleanor one last time. "I'm calling off the wedding." Gasps broke through the room like a wave. Eleanor stumbled back a step, her eyes welled with tears. "Malcolm, wait." But he was already walking toward Loretta. Toward the truth, toward the woman who had carried him through storms no one ever saw, and stood tall even as the world tried to break her. He took her hand in his. And just like that, the illusion shattered. The room didn't clap. No one cheered. Because it wasn't a movie. It was real. And reality doesn't end with applause. It ends with silence, and truth, and the quiet sound of a mother's breath steadying itself after too many years of holding it in. Loretta Rivers had never liked being the center of attention. She'd spent most of her life blending into the background, working behind counters, wiping tables after hours, and taking the late shifts no one wanted. Her strength had never come from the spotlight. It came from what she did when no one was watching. But now, all eyes were on her. And for once, she couldn't hide. The ballroom was silent. Malcolm stood beside her, holding her hand tightly, his decision still hanging in the air. He had just called off the wedding, in front of hundreds of people, not out of anger, but out of love. Not to make a scene, but to take a stand. Loretta looked at her son, and for the first time in years, she saw the little boy behind the man again. The boy who used to fall asleep on her shoulder, who used to ask for one more bedtime story, one more hug before school. Her heart swelled and ached all at once. She took a deep breath. Her voice was soft at first, gentle but steady. "I know many of you are confused," she said, looking around the room. "Some of you are embarrassed. Some of you are angry. But I'm not here to shame anyone." She paused, then looked directly at Eleanor. "And I'm not here to destroy anyone either." Eleanor looked down, eyes glassy, face drained of all color. Loretta turned back to the room. "My name is Loretta Rivers. I'm a mother. I've worked in nursing homes, diners, supermarkets, and cleaning companies. You name it, I've probably worn the uniform." There were a few nods, a few murmurs of recognition. "I raised my son on faith and rice when money ran out. I raised him on bedtime poems and bus schedules and secondhand textbooks. And for reasons I'll carry for the rest of my life, I disappeared when he needed me most." She paused again, the weight of those words landing heavily. "I didn't walk away because I didn't love my child. I walked away because I was broken, and I didn't want him to watch me fall apart." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't stop. "When I saw his face on that wedding flyer, I didn't know if I had the right to come back, so I stayed quiet. I signed up to serve food on the biggest day of his life, not to interfere, not to expose anything, but just to see him smile." A few guests wiped their eyes. She looked down at her hands, the same ones that had blistered from scrubbing floors, that had once held Malcolm's as he learned to walk. "I've worked my whole life to keep my dignity, even in silence, even in shame, even when people looked right through me like I didn't matter." Then she lifted her eyes again, stronger now. "But today, I got slapped in the face. Not because of what I did, but because of who someone thought I wasn't." Her voice was calm, not bitter, just honest. "And the truth is, I am a server. And I am a mother. And those two things are not opposites. They are not excuses to be judged." She turned back to Malcolm and placed a hand over his heart. "And you, my son, you are everything I dreamed you would become. You stood up today, not just for me, but for every person who has ever been disrespected for simply doing their job, for showing up, for existing." Malcolm's eyes were wet now. He gripped her hand tighter. Loretta looked around one final time. "This moment wasn't supposed to be mine, and I don't want it to be. But if it is, then let it be a reminder that no matter how successful you become, how big your name gets, or how expensive your suit is, none of it means anything if you forget how to treat people with basic human decency." There was a long silence, and then softly, someone clapped. Just one person, then two, then more. No applause for drama, for truth, for courage, for grace. Loretta didn't bow.
She didn't smile.
She simply stepped back, took a breath, and let her son guide her out of the spotlight. Because she didn't need the world to know her story. She just needed her son to know he was never forgotten. And now, he did. It only took one video, one shaky clip filmed on a phone from halfway across the ballroom, zoomed in just enough to catch the slap, the silence, and the moment Malcolm said, "You just slapped my mother." By the time the servers were clearing dessert plates and guests were quietly slipping out of the venue, the video had already crossed state lines, uploaded, shared, tweeted, reposted, and stitched into reaction videos with hashtags like #wildfire. The wedding slap? Black mothers matter. You people is racist. Respect is basic. In under 6 hours, the clip hit 1 million views. By morning, it had gone global. Twitter was on fire. Some people couldn't believe what they saw. Others, especially Black viewers and service workers, believed it all too well. This is why respect for working-class folks isn't optional. You never know who someone is, one tweet read, paired with the video slowed down and zoomed in to catch Eleanor's expression. This is not just about a slap. This is about how white wealth still thinks it can humiliate Black dignity without consequence, another user wrote, gaining over 300,000 likes. Celebrities started weighing in. A Grammy-winning artist retweeted the video with the words, "My mama cleaned houses so I could sing. If you slapped her, we'd have to shut the whole wedding down." A best-selling author posted, "I'm not applauding Malcolm because he's a hero. I'm applauding because he shouldn't have to be. Standing up for your mother shouldn't be rare. It should be standard." Even news outlets got involved. By noon the next day, a popular daytime talk show was discussing the Whitmore Rivers wedding incident. The host held up a screenshot of Loretta standing beside Malcolm, the image now iconic. "This is the face of real strength," she said. "Not the money, not the gown, not the venue, but the mother who stood still while being slapped and still chose grace." Articles exploded across media sites.
Slap heard around the internet. What it reveals about race, class, and respect in America. Why you people still hurts. The language of everyday racism. When power meets privilege, breaking down the Charleston wedding scandal. Eleanor tried to stay silent, but silence on the internet is just another kind of noise. Within 48 hours, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Clips from her lifestyle YouTube channel resurfaced. Viewers dissected past episodes, her tone with waitstaff, and the jokes she made when she thought the mic was off. Suddenly, her curated online brand, Southern charm, home decor, philanthropic brunches, crumbled like a paper set left out in the rain. Sponsors pulled out. A luxury skincare line issued a statement ending their partnership with Eleanor, citing their commitment to diversity, equity, and dignity for all communities. A fashion house scrubbed her image from their spring campaign. A nonprofit she once sat on the board for released a formal apology and announced her resignation. She tried to post a written apology, but the internet wasn't in a forgiving mood. "I didn't know she was his mother," she wrote. Slap heard around the internet. What it reveals about race, class, and respect in America. Why you people still hurts. The language of everyday racism. When power meets privilege, breaking down the Charleston wedding scandal. Eleanor tried to stay silent, but silence on the internet is just another kind of noise. Within 48 hours, her name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Clips from her lifestyle YouTube channel resurfaced. Viewers dissected past episodes, her tone with waitstaff, and the jokes she made when she thought the mic was off. Suddenly, her curated online brand, Southern charm, home decor, philanthropic brunches, crumbled like a paper set left out in the rain. Sponsors pulled out. A luxury skincare line issued a statement ending their partnership with Eleanor, citing their commitment to diversity, equity, and dignity for all communities. A fashion house scrubbed her image from their spring campaign. A nonprofit she once sat on the board for released a formal apology and announced her resignation. She tried to post a written apology, but the internet wasn't in a forgiving mood. "I didn't know she was his mother," she wrote. Thousands replied within minutes. And if she wasn't, would it have been okay then? Even people who didn't usually weigh in on viral stories started using the moment as a teaching tool. Professors assigned the clip in media studies and ethics classes. Pastors quoted Loretta's speech in sermons. Podcasters broke down each beat, analyzing it like a cultural earthquake. One slap exposing layers of historical tension, unspoken bias, and the everyday dehumanization of Black women in service roles. And through it all, Loretta stayed silent. No interviews, no Instagram, no press tour. She had said what needed to be said in that ballroom. She didn't need to say it again. Malcolm, too, declined interviews. He released only one brief statement through his company. Respect should never depend on someone's title, income, or skin color. My mother taught me that. I will always stand by her. Instead of capitalizing on the moment, Malcolm stepped away. He stopped posting. He returned to his community work. He kept his phone on silent. He took his mother out for walks. And while the world screamed and judged and canceled and speculated, they sat on a park bench in downtown Charleston, quietly feeding ducks. Two people, two generations, one bond, unbroken.
Because long after the hashtags fade and the outrage moves on to the next scandal, one truth will still remain. Loretta never asked to be famous. She just asked to be treated like a human being. Malcolm Rivers had always believed in logic. In code, there were only two options, true or false, on or off, working or broken. No gray areas, no maybe. But after that slap, the silence, and the look in his mother's eyes, Malcolm realized something deeper. In life, doing nothing is still a choice, and silence can be a decision that screams. So he made his choice, and this time, he said it out loud. 3 days after the wedding that never was, Malcolm stood behind a podium at a press conference outside the Homepin headquarters. He wore no tie, just a white shirt, open at the collar, sleeves rolled up, face calm but tired. The room was packed. Cameras clicked, reporters leaned forward, and microphones angled toward him like a forest of questions. He cleared his throat and began. Let me start by saying this. I didn't cancel a wedding because of a spilled drink. I didn't cancel it because of an accident. I canceled it because of what came after. He paused. Because someone I loved used their power to humiliate someone they thought had none. The crowd was still. A few murmurs in the back, but mostly silence. And that someone, Malcolm continued, was my mother. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She stood quietly while being disrespected. She didn't speak up to make herself a victim. She's not wired that way. She's the kind of woman who built her life around service, around strength, around dignity. He took a breath. When she was slapped, it wasn't just her skin that was hit. It was every woman who's ever been ignored while making the world run smoothly. Every person who's ever worn a uniform and been treated like part of the furniture. Every mother who gave everything and still got dismissed like she didn't matter. A journalist raised a hand, but Malcolm motioned gently. Let me finish. I don't need sympathy. I don't want clicks. I want clarity. He looked straight into the cameras. I will never allow anyone, no matter how wealthy, how educated, or how powerful, to insult my mother and remain a part of my life. I won't marry into a family that thinks kindness has to be earned, and I won't let this moment fade into another online trend. Then he stepped aside and walked over to a small stand holding a folded paper. I've spoken with my team, and today I'm announcing the launch of the Loretta Initiative, a $1 million fund dedicated to supporting Black women-owned small businesses in hospitality, care work, and service industries across the South. Grants will be awarded quarterly. No pitch decks, no buzzwords, just real support for women who do real work. The reporters erupted with questions, but Malcolm didn't stay to answer. He stepped away from the podium, hugged his mother, who had quietly appeared behind the curtain, and walked off the stage, hand in hand with her. The moment was recorded, shared, clipped, celebrated. But it wasn't a PR stunt. It was a son keeping a promise. That same afternoon, he sat across from Loretta at a small table outside a local bakery. She was sipping sweet tea. He was working on a biscuit. Neither spoke for a while. Then Loretta looked up, eyes soft but questioning. Are you sure about all this? Malcolm smiled. Yeah, Mama, I'm sure. I know that girl hurt you. She didn't hurt me, he said. She exposed herself, and I needed to see it. Loretta nodded slowly. You always were better at seeing the truth than I was, she said. Malcolm chuckled. I think I learned it from watching you. You saw things for what they were. You just never let it make you hard. They sat a while longer, listening to the hum of the street, children laughing in the park, a distant church bell ringing the hour. Then Malcolm said something he'd been holding on to. I spent so many years trying to make it, prove myself, climb, fit into rooms that were never built for people like me. And I thought success meant not looking back. Loretta reached across the table and gently tapped his hand. But you did look back. He smiled, and I saw the only person who ever truly had my back. Later that evening, he deleted his saved wedding vows from his phone.
Instead, he opened a new note and typed out a single line. Success means nothing if it costs your soul. Eleanor Whitmore sat alone in a hotel room that cost more per night than most people's monthly rent, surrounded by silence. The glitter was gone. The makeup was gone. Her publicist had stopped calling. Her parents, more concerned with the family name than their daughter's well-being, advised her to keep her head down and let the heat pass. But Eleanor knew something no press strategy could fix. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a reckoning. The internet didn't just turn against her because of a slap. It turned because the world saw something deeper in her reaction. Entitlement without remorse. Arrogance without awareness. Power without empathy. And now, for the first time in her perfectly manicured life, Eleanor had no script to follow. Days turned into a week. She stayed offline. She stopped answering texts from old friends who only wanted to gossip. She walked around Charleston in oversized sunglasses and a hoodie, hoping not to be recognized, and failing. People whispered. Some took photos. Others stared with looks that said, "You're the one who slapped the mother." But shame, when it finally hits, doesn't just humiliate you, it strips you. Eleanor began to ask herself the questions she had spent years avoiding. Why did I really react that way? What did I see when I looked at Loretta Rivers that made me feel above her? And how many other people have I treated that way without even realizing it? The questions weren't comfortable, but they were necessary. She started reading, not tabloids, not brand memos, but books, real ones. Memoirs, essays. Michelle Alexander, Toni Morrison, and Bell Hooks. She watched interviews, listened to podcasts, took notes, cried. And one day, she did something no one expected. She showed up at a small community center where Loretta had begun volunteering part-time after the fallout, helping organize resources for elderly caregivers and single mothers. Eleanor came in quietly. No cameras. No press. Just a woman in jeans and a white blouse, holding her breath. Loretta was setting up chairs for an evening discussion circle when she saw her. She didn't react. Didn't glare. Didn't flinch. She simply kept working. Eleanor approached, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said.
I need to say something." Loretta paused, turned, looked at her fully. The same woman who once stood frozen under a wedding chandelier now stood steady under fluorescent lights, eyes tired but kind. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I was raised to think I was good, a good person, polite, educated, progressive. But that day, when I looked at you, I didn't see a person. I saw someone I could blame, someone I thought didn't matter." Her throat tightened. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." Loretta didn't interrupt. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Eleanor continued. "I don't deserve it, but I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to unlearn what made me capable of doing what I did." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry."
Silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Then Loretta spoke, calm, measured, unwavering. I believe people can change. But change isn't a sentence. It's a lifetime. Eleanor nodded, her eyes filling. Loretta took a step closer. I don't hate you, she said. But I won't forget. Eleanor looked down. I understand. You want to do better? Don't prove it to me. Prove it to the people you'll meet who have less power than you. People who can't fight back. People who you used to overlook. I will, Eleanor said, her voice almost breaking. I swear I will. Loretta reached out, gently touching her arm, not in comfort, but in clarity. Then don't waste the pain. Let it make you better. They didn't hug. This wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. And sometimes, that's enough. Later that night, Malcolm asked his mother if she regretted speaking to Eleanor. Loretta stirred her tea slowly, thinking. I don't regret listening, she said. But forgiveness isn't something I hand out like party favors. It has to grow on its own. Do you think it ever will? Malcolm asked. Loretta shrugged gently. Maybe. Maybe not. But I didn't do it for her. I did it so you would know we don't carry hate. We carry standards. Malcolm smiled, understanding now what took years to learn. Redemption isn't about who says sorry. It's about who becomes different. And regret? Regret is the price you pay when you realize too late what respect costs.
The story didn't end with a press conference. It didn't end with a public apology or a viral video or even a canceled wedding. Because stories like this don't really end. They echo. They shift something in the room. They stick in the corners of our minds, showing up later when we least expect them. When we're standing in line at a coffee shop, when we walk past someone in a uniform, when we catch ourselves speaking just a little too sharply to someone we think doesn't matter. Loretta Rivers didn't go back to hiding after all this. She didn't sign book deals or give TED Talks or go on morning shows. She kept volunteering at the community center, kept walking to the market every Saturday, and kept folding her laundry with the same care she once used to fold her son's school clothes. But something had changed. Not in her, but around her. People saw her now. They stopped her on the street to say thank you. They asked for advice. They asked how to help. She always answered the same way. Start with how you treat people who have nothing to give you. Malcolm, for his part, didn't retreat either. He didn't launch a campaign to clean up his image. He didn't date publicly. He focused on his company, his team, and more than anything, his time with his mother. They cooked dinner together in his condo, a small kitchen compared to the estate where everything had unraveled. But here, the food tasted better, the conversations were warmer, and the laughter didn't echo. It filled the room. One night, after dishes were done and the news was humming, she dried her hands on a dish towel, walked to the window, and looked out at the Charleston skyline. I think they can, she said softly, but only if they want to. Only if the truth hurts bad enough. Malcolm nodded. Then she turned to him and added, but the real change? It starts when no one's watching, when you're not trying to impress, when you're just better, because you know you should be. That stayed with him. And maybe it should stay with us too.
Because we all play a part in stories like this, whether we're the one being ignored, the one doing the ignoring, or the one who chooses to finally say something. So here's the lesson. Respect isn't earned by age or title or income. It's not reserved for the polished or the powerful. Respect is basic. It's human. It should never be a reward. It should be the default. And yet, we live in a world where it isn't, where people like Loretta get looked through, not looked at, where a uniform becomes a reason to speak more harshly, not more kindly, where someone's value is measured in status instead of story. But the truth is, every person you pass, every grocery clerk, every janitor, every nurse, every bus driver, carries a lifetime of moments you'll never see, battles you'll never know, sacrifices they made for people who may never say thank you. You don't have to know someone's story to treat them like they have one. That's what Malcolm learned. That's what Eleanor is still learning. That's what the story was always about. Not a slap, not a wedding, not a scandal, but a mirror. A reflection of who we become when power meets pressure. A reflection of whether we act with decency when we think no one important is watching. Because Loretta Rivers wasn't important to that wedding crowd, not until her bloodline was revealed. And then suddenly, she was someone worth defending. But what if she hadn't been Malcolm's mother? Would anyone have stood up? Would anyone have stopped eating their filet mignon long enough to say, "That's not right"? That's the real test. How we treat people when there's nothing in it for us. So the next time you feel yourself slipping into impatience, into judgment, into entitlement, remember Loretta. Remember the quiet strength of a woman who stood tall even after being humiliated. Remember the son who chose dignity over convenience. Remember that change doesn't begin with hashtags or headlines. It begins with you. And maybe, just maybe, after watching this story, you'll pick up the phone and call your mother, or text your father, or say thank you to the person holding the door open, or smile at the cashier, or tip a little more, or simply pause long enough to remember that everyone is carrying something. Everyone. Even the woman behind the tray. Especially her. So, if this story moved you, even just a little, do one thing. Tell someone you love them today. Tell your parents you're grateful. Tell your partner you see them. Or, better yet, show it. Because words are wind, but actions are the proof of who we really are. Thank you for watching this story with your heart open. Drop your location in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Lagos, Atlanta, New York, Cape Town, London, Kingston, Detroit. Let's show the world how far gratitude and respect can reach. This is Hidden Worth, where we find the truth beneath the surface. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, stay human.